Hi, you guys. This is Richard Sachs, your host on Lost Arts Radio. Nice to be with you again. Thanks for joining us. And we've got an important show today, as always, but this one you really want to pay attention to because it's a sequel to a first one that we had just about, 50 months ago, a little over 4 years, in 2015. And it was in conjunction with what was going on right at that time with the developments of a proposed bill in California called SB 277 by our friend Richard Pan in the legislature there. He was a very interesting character. And it was to take away a lot of the ability to choose whether your kids would be vaccinated or not, specifically for getting into school. And it said that basically everybody had to have their kids vaccinated or they couldn't send their kids to school, and they couldn't even send them to private school. And they tried to include homeschooling too and didn't manage to do that quite at the time, but I'm sure they'd still love to. And that is a developing saga. And we got a great guest at that time in 2015, whose name was Christina Hildebrand. And she had started a group just recently, I think, at the time called A Voice for Choice, which was to educate people and give them a more close approximation to what we're supposed to have as informed consent. And in fact, that's supposed to be rigidly followed all the time, and it's virtually never followed with any kind of medical procedures anymore, as far as full information goes. So now there are further developments happening after many people protested that bill and drove in from all over the state and stood for hours in line. And the committee that was hearing those supposed input information from the general public said, well, there's too many of you, obviously you care too much about this. So the only thing you can say is your name for and against and then go away. And they just basically ignored everybody's input as far as I could tell watching those hearings. So now they're doing the next step, apparently SB 276, which wants to get rid of this irritating what they consider a loophole called medical exemptions and make it so the doctor can't just freely do those when appropriate. And I want to see what Christina has to fill in the massive gaps in what I've just tried to present as little bits of it, and see what she's doing now, what's going to happen next, what's going on at the moment. Is it a repeat of 277? And a little bit, if we have time, about all the other issues that are proceeding in parallel to this and share a lot of common elements. So welcome, Christina, and thanks for fitting us in for a few minutes. I really appreciate it. And
thank you.
Let's assume that some of these people that are watching and listening now weren't here the first time and don't know anything about your organization and are not sure why this issue even matters. And we don't have to spend a lot of time on bringing everybody up to speed, but a big part of the point of this broadcast is new people, not just the ones who could recite what we're saying, but the ones who have no idea. Yeah. So some background.
Yeah, sure. So you're absolutely right. So in 2015, SB 277 came along. Senator Pan, who is our senator from Sacramento, brought that forward. And it basically took away the personal belief exemption in California. We were the third state, West Virginia and Mississippi had never had a personal belief exemption or a religious exemption. Every other state has, or at that time had, either a religious exemption or a personal belief exemption or both. And what that left us with was a medical exemption. And during the conversation of SB 277, there are a number of legislators that were very concerned with the medical exemption and ensuring that it was a broad, robust medical exemption. And it was up to the doctor's discretion. And when Governor Brown signed it, his signing statement said, I'm signing SB 277 with the knowledge that there is a strong, robust medical exemption at the discretion of the doctors. And so what we saw then was doctors, these parents, and there's two checkpoints. So checkpoints at kindergarten, at 7th grade. If you were between 1st and 6th grade, you were grandfathered in. If you were above 7th grade, you were also grandfathered in. And you, which meant that you didn't have to show any proof of vaccinations or anything. You could keep your personal belief exemption until then. What we found was kindergartners and 7th graders started to get these medical exemptions. And medical exemptions given at the discretion of the doctor is what it should be, because it's personalized medicine. So you go to your doctor. If your doctor decides that you need a medical exemption for whatever reason, they write that medical exemption. It could be a temporary medical exemption. For example, if you were planning to get vaccinated and you just had a cold, or you were immunocompromised or whatever, or it could be a permanent medical exemption that you should never get vaccinated. And what we found in 2016 was, well, I would say probably in 2015-16, there were probably 150 to 200 doctors that wrote medical exemptions, or were willing to do the evaluation to write.
Which is not very many out of all the doctors.
Not very many. There's probably about 5,000 pediatricians in California, so it's a percentage. And the reason behind the other ones not being willing to do it was that there are insurance incentives to have children vaccinated. So there are many practices in California that do not take unvaccinated or partially vaccinated kids. They will
translate
only take
insurance incentives. Tell people what that means.
So Blue Cross Blue Shield, for example, gives $400 to every doctor. To a doctor for every patient that is 2 years old and up to date on the CDC schedule. And you have to meet a certain minimum, and every insurance has a different criteria, but you have to meet a minimum threshold in order to get any of your bonus. So you don't just get $400 for kid number one. You have to be at like 75, 85, whatever the number is, % of your practice has to be fully vaccinated in order for you to get that bonus. And when you look at some practices, this is, tens of thousands of dollars every year that they would be losing out on. And so they have chosen not to admit any unvaccinated or partially vaccinated children. And in doing so, they're also not willing to give medical exemptions. They're not willing to write medical exemptions. There was actually, just skipping forward to this year, there was a group that did a survey of doctors, 882 practices in California, and they asked them two things. One, will you be willing to write or they've called and gave an example saying that, my child, we just moved in from out of state, my child is 12 months old, or my child is older, but my child at 12 months old had an anaphylactic reaction, which is the most severe reaction you can have, and you shouldn't be vaccinated after that. And 882 practices said that they would not see the child, that they would not be willing to do a medical exemption evaluation. They were basically told that they were not the correct practice for that family, basically said, you're not going to be able to come here.
Wow.
So we already have this issue of there not being enough doctors who are willing to even put their license basically on the line, not get the extra money. What we saw in 2016 was that in Santa Barbara County, there was this lady called Charity Dean. She was the head of the local health department in Santa Barbara County. And she basically went into all the Santa Barbara public schools and asked them for all of their medical exemptions. And we found this out because one of the schools had said to one of the parents, they were asking for the medical exemptions, and the parents had said, we don't want medical records shared. And she said, we're being asked for these. I think we have to give them. And she said, and so we looked into it, our organization looked into it further, and we found that this woman, Charity Dean, basically was culling all of the medical exemptions. And she had what's called a FERPA violation. FERPA is the Federal Schools Privacy Act, that basically says no child's school information can be shared without all the personal information being redacted. Well, they hadn't redacted any of the information. So a FERPA violation and a FERPA complaint was filed. It takes about 2-3 years for that to happen. And really all you get is a slap on the wrist for it. Huh. But what we dug into was this woman, Charity Dean, and she had created what was called a medical exemption pilot program. And we did a whole bunch of Public Records Act requests and got all this information, basically showing that she was also promoting this to other counties, and that other counties were doing this as well. And they were basically getting all of the medical exemptions, and they didn't care that the children's information was redacted because they didn't care about the children. They cared about the doctors.
I want to clarify something in what you're explaining here.
Yep.
When you say she and others like her went in and took the medical exemptions. What you're saying is they took the record of who gave the exemption, who got the exemption, what reason was given as an excuse, so that they could potentially go give problems to the doctors that were giving those exemptions, right?
Yep. And I'm giving you this background because this is the start of SB 276, which is where we're at today.
Okay.
So they ended up realizing, we need to take out all the children's personal information. So they redacted all of that, but that's not what they were interested in. They were interested in these doctors. Right. And so they basically created this list of doctors who were giving multiple exemptions, and they're giving multiple exemptions because they're basically specialists. These doctors, and we're now down from 200 to, I'm going to guess there are probably 15, 20 doctors that are actually willing to give medical exemptions or willing to do the evaluation for medical exemptions that are not specialists like oncologists. Oncologists give temporary medical exemptions quite often because, for example, when a kid's undergoing chemo, that child and their siblings cannot get vaccinated. So they'll give temporary medical exemptions quite often. But if you go outside of the specialties, the oncologists, those types of things, to regular pediatricians or family doctors, I would say there are probably at most 15, 20 doctors that are actually willing to still write and do medical exams.
In the whole state?
In the whole state, yeah.
So the motivation program against it is really working well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And I would say all of those doctors are also what happened with this Charity Dean issue, this medical exemption program, was that it hyped up school nurses and county health department officers to file complaints to the medical board. So when they were seeing doctors writing, the 100 medical exemptions in that area because they were the only doctor that was actually even willing. And I would say most of these doctors that are still willing to do it are really specialists in vaccine injury, in adversonomics, which is the study of vaccines and the adverse reactions to vaccines. And they've really they're up to date on the latest research in, why a child shouldn't be vaccinated, why they should be vaccinated, and they look at family history. They look at, they recognize that a vaccine is just like any other medical treatment or drug, and that they need to use the same caution. And so they really have done, but they're very, very researched in the field. And so they are what I would call the specialists. So, Senator Pan will say, well, these are people, they're script selling. They're just selling hundreds of medical exemptions. Well, they're not. They're the specialists. If I'm a parent and my kid has a kidney issue, I'm going to go to a kidney specialist. If my kid has a vaccine injury, I'm going to go to a vaccine injury specialist. Same thing. So so 2016, 17, 18, more and more doctors were being reported to the medical board. And they were being reported to the medical board, not by the patient. So usually when you have a report to the medical board, it's because your doctor's done something wrong to you or a family member that's incapacitated or died. And you go and you file the complaint, and it's usually, they've done something seriously wrong, and you're filing the complaint to get them, de-licensed, so to speak. Right. So what was happening was, because the patients weren't the ones that were submitting the complaints to the medical board, there are three groups that have done it. There are school nurses that are basically saying, this doctor's written the majority of medical exemptions in our school. There must be something wrong. We don't believe there is, but okay. The county health departments that were culling the medical exemptions and basically going across all schools and saying, okay, there's doctors writing a lot of them. Will submit a complaint, or other doctors. So Kaiser is known for this. Kaiser Permanente is a health insurance sort of hospital doctor conglomerate in California, and they have been specifically told, you do not write any medical exemptions. We do not do it as a practice. And so what's happened was there are people that have Kaiser, and when you have Kaiser as an insurance, you can only go within the Kaiser doctors. So there were people that had Kaiser. Their doctors didn't require them to vaccinate, but they basically told them that they wouldn't do a medical exemption evaluation, even for kids who had anaphylactic shock, like serious reactions, or their siblings had serious reactions, that they wouldn't write the medical exemption. So these people would go to a specialist, a different doctor, get the medical exemption, and they would then bring it back, and we told them, please don't do this anymore, but they went to their Kaiser doctor and said, oh, I got a medical exemption. And the Kaiser doctor reported that doctor to the medical board saying, this is not, I don't believe this is valid.
What would make the Kaiser doctor want to do that to another doctor?
Because the Kaiser doctors are they believe in vaccines for everyone. They have the similar mantra to Senator Pan. It doesn't matter if you've been injured before. You can still get vaccinated some more.
Yeah.
The vaccines aren't going to do you that much harm. You're not going to get
You could have 10,000 of them and still be fine. Exactly.
And so they don't believe, if you go in, and for example, they don't believe in something like siblings. So if you have one child and the child is having 15 seizures a day, even if you've been compensated by the vaccine program, as a parent, why would you give another child of yours the exact same drug that, you wouldn't do that with any other drug. If you take antibiotics, if you take anything else, you would be so super careful because genetically those two children are very, very similar. And so, there are many parents that are just like, I am not vaccinating that second child. I will take the risk of the disease over what I've seen happen and the life-changing thing that happens.
And that may not even be a genetics issue, because emotionally, if you see it happen to one child and you say, well, this other child's not related, so do it to them too, that may not be your thought pattern.
Right. Exactly. But, we'll take it as, from a doctor's perspective, but somewhere like there are many doctors that do not believe that and would vaccinate that second child right on schedule. And, we have parents who have 3-4 vaccine injured children because their doctors were like, it's not the vaccines. Right. And it's only when they woke up and were just like, stop the madness. We're stopping everything, that they realized, and then they have a 5th child and they don't vaccinate them at all. And that child's healthy. And it's kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, get to 2018, last year, and we're in a situation in California where we don't have very many doctors writing medical exemptions. The ones that are being very brave. Basically, they're in front of the medical board, or they're being brought in front of the medical board. We have, what I was saying about the medical board. So because the patient isn't making the complaint, it's the medical board has a hard time getting the documents for the patient history. Because usually, as I said, the patient files the complaint and says, yes, please go look at all of my patient history. Well, these patients were not making the complaint, so they didn't want the history of their child, shared. Like I don't have a problem with my doctor. No, I don't want my medical records shared. Yeah. And so in California, in order to get the medical records, the medical board has to subpoena the doctor, and the doctor basically has to hand over the medical records.
Now, isn't there some kind of doctor-patient relationship that gives that privilege of privacy?
So
how do they overcome that?
And that's the subpoena. So there is, if the court 99.9% of the time grants it, if the medical board goes to the court and says, we want to subpoena these medical records because we're investigating this doctor as to whether he's legitimately practicing medicine. Okay. And so the court says, okay, yes, that's a good enough reason for you to subpoena these records.
Right.
There is one doctor in California, Dr. Ron Kennedy, who has a lawsuit that is fighting that he shouldn't have to hand over his patient records if the patient doesn't want them handed over. So he has a court case going on there. We have another court case on which I'll come to later. But basically, so we're in this situation. In 2018, Senator Pan put out an article in, I think it was in Pediatrics, basically saying, and there were 2 other articles, basically saying that the medical exemptions are not working in California, that doctors are script selling, that there are not good enough reasons being given for the medical exemptions, all this type of thing.
Yeah.
We knew we had known that he was going to come back with another bill, and my guess was that it was to do with the doctors. It was to do with something along these lines. And so it was very clear by the end, and he was going on radio and TV shows saying, we've got to do something because this isn't right. Medical exemption, these doctors.
There could be another measles outbreak if this goes much farther. Right?
I know. And oh my goodness, what happened at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019? We had the measles. Yeah. And, then they have that uproar. So he dropped this bill in March, which was late for a bill to be dropped. Our organization, A Voice for Choice Advocacy, went in December and January and handed a 40-page packet to every legislature. And we said, we believe this is coming. Please, can you read this? We believe it's a witch hunt on the doctors. This is the reason why there are so few doctors writing so many medical exemptions. And so we knew it. We dropped that and we went into offices and they're like, really? You think there's going to be another vaccine bill? Like, really? You think this? And we're like, I would love it if we're wrong. Like, please show us that we're wrong.
The staffs were telling you that?
Yeah.
That they couldn't believe it? Okay.
Yeah. And I was just like, if you're wrong, I would make the happiest year of my life because I'm not going to have to spend it up in Sacramento. It progressed and we were pretty sure. And he dropped it, I think March, like 3rd, 6th, the first week in March, he dropped it, which was the last week that you could, basically you had to have gotten your bills in, but you could gotten them and you could get them going by March.
Okay, so for people that don't know what drop is, what's drop?
Oh, so so our legislatures are allowed to, they have 40, so this is, let me just give you a background on California legislation. Our legislatures are in session for more than any other legislative body in the U.S. So our legislatures are in session from January until September every year. Just to compare, Texas has a session that's, I think, 4 or 5 months long every other year. Montana, I think, has 6 weeks every other year. So those people are not professional legislators. Our legislators are professional legislators. That's what they do for a job. That's what they're, that's
their job, and they have a 3-month vacation at the end of each year.
Exactly. Well, and then that usually every other year is elections. So yes, they're so yes, they're working this business. They are not part of their communities, I don't believe. They will say they're part of their communities, but, they're up in Sacramento from Monday to Thursday every week. So, you're not similar to, Texas for the other year and a half. They are in their communities doing whatever their vocation is. If they were Senator Pan, they would be a pediatrician for that year and a half. So it's very, very different. Every legislature can bring forward, assembly members can bring forward 40 bills every year. Senators can bring forward 30 bills every year.
For every single one of them.
Every single one of them.
That's a lot of bills.
We have 40 senators and we have 80 assembly members. That's over 3,000 bills every year. They're trying to change our statute 3,000 different ways every year.
And of course, every citizen is required to know every detail of every proposed bill.
Well, and the legislatures are supposed to read them, which they obviously, how do you do that, right?
Right. So almost nobody's reading anything, which brings up the question of how do they decide what to vote on? Right.
So, exactly. So this is, and I'm just giving you that as a background because California is very different. People are like, well, why does this happen in California? California is so different in their legislative process than other states. It's also a reason why, people ask me in other states, well, can you help us? And I'm just like, I can't because I don't know your legislative process. And so, I'm focused on California because I now know it inside and out. The interesting thing is these bills that get brought up by Senator Pan are treated so differently from any other bill that goes through the legislature. So just to go back, in 2015, we formed our organization, A Voice for Choice Advocacy, and our goal was to stay in the legislature for the next however many years until we repeal SB 277. That is our ultimate goal.
Okay.
And so the last 4 years, what we've been doing is we've been basically supporting. So let me go. Our organization's mission statement is to educate and advocate for anything that goes for informed choice and transparency of anything that goes into your body. So that includes food, air, water, 5G, pesticides, you name it, we do it. And there are a lot of, out of the 3,500 bills every year, there are a lot of bills that cover those topics. So our goal was, let's build relationships and build our credibility in the Capitol over the years while we're trying to repeal this bill, over the years. And so that's what we've done.
That you could work on all the other ones and not just that one. Right?
Exactly. And it's, we coming in and saying we want to kill a bill, we're opposed to a bill, isn't the best way to start a relationship with a legislator.
Means you have a negative group. Exactly. All you want to do is be against something.
Exactly. And so our goal was to be for things. So there were plenty of bills across these last 4 years that, wanted to take dyes out of food. Fabulous. We're all for that. Wanted to, what's the lead content in water in schools? What's the, those types of bills that are also of interest to us. So we were looking for bills that we could support. There were a couple of bills that we were still against, but there were a lot of bills that we were supporting and just sort of building that relationship and building our rapport in the legislature. So when we came in this year, and I will say in 2015, we were one of two groups that hired a lobbyist, and that was a very controversial topic. And if I didn't have to hire a lobbyist, I would not hire a lobbyist. I don't believe it's the way business in the legislature and in our how our elected officials should be.
That's talked about, but almost nobody really has any idea what a lobbyist is. Some of them just think that it's evil. It's an evil person.
And I thought it was evil. Like I did not think that we should hire a lobbyist. But what I saw with 2015 and SB 277 was we had unprecedented numbers in that building. They had never seen anything like our movement. We had thousands of people show up for every hearing, and they didn't hear us.
No, they were all ignored.
Hear us. And so I was just like, it was the second hearing, and Senator Pan didn't have the votes, and we thought we had crushed this thing. And the chair of the committee turned to him and said, "You don't have the votes. Would you like to come back next week and see if you have the votes?" And I just sat there and I was just like, how can you do that? You don't have the votes. Like, of course he's going to have the votes. He's going to have done something by next week to have the votes. Like, and I realized at that point, we didn't know how that building worked. The inside of that building worked. And so we hired a lobbyist. I think it was too little, too late. But my goal was, I am going up to Sacramento every Monday through Wednesday, and I am learning how this building works. And so I basically shadowed her.
When you say how a building works, what does that mean?
Well, how the legislation and the meetings and the how that building operates from a legislative perspective, but also from who has the influence. How do you get meetings with the actual legislatures? That was the other thing that we were having problems with, was we couldn't meet with the legislators, that we were being given their lowest level of staffers.
Whose job is to keep you away, basically.
Exactly. Just, we'll listen to you, but goodbye. And so I was just like, we need to learn how the intricacies of this building works. Like, how do the people interact? Like, what is and I realized the only way to do that was to hire a lobbyist. So so now don't lose your train of thought. But what is a lobbyist? Because and I know most people would say, "Oh, we know what a lobbyist is." They have no idea. What's a lobbyist? So basically, a lobbyist, and there are many types of lobbyists, but basically, a lobbyist is somebody you hire, and it can be an individual that hires them. It can be an organization that hires them. It can be a corporation that hires them. And some corporations have and some nonprofits have internal lobbyists. So they're a salaried person, but they do the same job. And they basically are somebody that lives in the Capitol. They are there every single day. If you have a contractual lobbyist, which is what we have, you basically hire them. They probably have anywhere from 3 to 10 other clients that they work on. And they go in and they have meetings for you with legislators and their staff. The issue is, because they are in that building every day, they're going to events with those legislators and with the staff. They have a really good relationship with the legislators and the staff. And so they basically are what open the door. And yes, you're paying for them to open the door. But we as regular people you can't walk in and open that door. It just doesn't happen. Should it happen? Absolutely yes. Are we, as our grassroots movement, getting better at being able to open the door? Absolutely. But we still don't have anything close to what the lobbyists have. The other thing, the lobbyists...
Why does the legislator want to talk to that lobbyist? What's their motive?
Because they will get election funding at some point. And you cannot talk elections and policy at the same time. But the knowledge is that those clients are going to give money to election campaigns at some point.
Okay, that makes it.
So they have money. They have money.
So the lobbyist that you found and hired.
Yes.
Did you evaluate where their money was coming from? Was that part of the decision of who to hire?
Yes, and that was why we have had such a hard time hiring lobbyists or finding them, because the majority of lobbyists in Sacramento and if you go federal, Washington, D.C., have a pharmaceutical client or a healthcare client. Okay. And it is a conflict of interest for them to take us on.
So you had very few potential choices of lobbyists.
We did, yes. Okay. The other thing is, by the time we were trying to hire, we were known as the crazy anti-vax red shirts in Sacramento that came in the masses. So we not only had the issue of that, we needed to find somebody who is willing to put their money on the underdog, basically.
Wow.
And Roxanne amazingly took us up on that.
How did you get somebody willing to do that and go against the whole tide of everything?
I think she has a passion for this, and she did not know about the vaccine issue at all.
Right.
But she kind of was just like, I see these thousands of people show up and they're not being heard, and they need a voice. And, if I can help them, give them that voice, I'm willing to do that. And she didn't have any pharmaceutical clients. She does have the nurses, the California Nurses Association, which did not take a stand on SB 277 or this bill, and so she has them as one of her clients. But other than that, she doesn't have any other. Most of her stuff is in financial and technology. Is her other clients. Wow. So come 2000 this year, we knew the bill was coming. We knew we had very few doctors that were writing medical exemptions or doing the evaluations to begin with. The Voice of San Diego, which is a paper in San Diego, published 100. They had gotten all of the redacted medical exemptions for the kids in San Diego Unified School District, and found that one doctor wrote a third of them. That doctor is a specialist. She actually vaccinates in her practice. She tries to vaccinate everyone fully, but she takes it very, very cautiously. And she recognizes that there are some children that can't be vaccinated or can't be vaccinated fully. I mean, she'll do things like, we had her actually come up and lobby in the Capitol, and she gave an example of a child whose parents were concerned and wanted to take a slow schedule, and she gave them, or he had a reaction. They were on a regular schedule. He had a reaction. She came to him. They came to her and said, we've had a reaction. His legs swole up to 3 times the size. And she said, okay, well, we're not going to do that vaccine anymore. We're going to try a different vaccine and see what happens there. Again, and she said, take some Benadryl before, his legs swelled up ridiculously. And she said, okay, you know what? I'm going to do some research on what's common in those 2 vaccines. And she found that both vaccines had 3 ingredients in common. One of them was aluminum, whatever. And she said, you know what? We're going to try a vaccine. And these parents wanted to vaccinate the kids. That was their mindset. To me, as long as you've done the research, I'm fine with what, end point you come, what decision you make for your family. That's your choice. Yeah. But so they tried one of the live vaccines, which didn't have aluminum in it. And he did fine on that. And so he got the live vaccines, but he has a medical exemption to all the ones that contain aluminum. And she I think she did an allergy test, and he's extremely allergic to aluminum. And so she said, that's that. And so this is the person who's written a third of all medical exemptions in San Diego. And so, of course, that came out in the press. And then Senator Pan, as I said, dropped the bill, which means that he basically filed the bill across the desk, which means he put the wording in. And it was pretty much what we expected. In an SB 276, it basically has 3 components to it. And his argument is we need to go after these fraudulent doctors that are writing, fake medical exemptions. Right. I agree. If there are doctors out there doing that. They should not be practicing medicine. The issue is, I can guarantee you that any doctor that is selling a medical exemption for, let's say, $500 doesn't have enough money to go up against the medical board, and they're going to lose their license. So I personally don't think there are any doctors doing this, but okay, let's say that there are.
They're not great at math if they are doing it for that reason.
That's very true, yes. Let's say that they are, okay? Let's just say there's some out there that are not good at math. Right. Those ones, yeah, sure, I think they should be brought in front of the medical board too. But there aren't a lot of them. There may be, even Senator Pan can't find them, but there may be 3 or 4 of them. Well, you are now penalizing the whole the whole 140,000 physicians in California for these 2-3 people that may be doing this. His other argument was the medical board is trying to investigate these doctors, and they can't because they can't get the medical records, which is actually not true. They can subpoena them, and they've been getting them. There's one doctor, as I said, that was fighting it, and rightfully so. And, if that's the case, let's let that fall out and see what happens, kind of thing. But so basically, he has these false premises. We also believe that, so the other piece of this story is that Charity Dean last year was promoted from the local health officer in Santa Barbara County to being number 3 at the California Health Department. Wow. Okay, this is important. She also was awarded Person of the Year by the CMA, which is the California Medical Association, that is our trade organization for doctors, which I will say, out of 140,000 doctors in California, only 26,000, so about 20%, are part of the CMA. The rest do not believe that they are, they're not, they say they're representative of all physicians. They're not representative of all physicians by any means. So those are 2 important pieces. It all came together to me. This bill is sponsored by the CMA, which is crazy that they are sponsoring this bill. There are many other bills that had the same tone. So going after doctors, putting the oversight in a different organization than the medical board. Those bills and having databases for medical history, those things previously the California Medical Association was opposed to, and yet they are the sponsors of this bill. I truly believe Charity Dean has a huge part. Charity Dean and Senator Pan have a huge part to play in this bill, and why the CMA is a sponsor of it, why it even came about. The bill goes into play, and it basically says 3 things. Number 1, doctors will be, the initial bill was every medical exemption will be submitted by the doctor to the health department, not to the medical board, to the health department. And the health department will decide whether to accept or deny it.
Okay, why do you think they wanted the health department instead of the medical board to decide that?
Well, they put it under because Charity Dean is in the health department. Oh,
that's total coincidence, but I see what you mean.
Exactly. I mean, she set herself up for this job. Who is going to be the person overseeing this?
Okay. In other words, she would be like the empress of decision making for a vaccine.
Yeah. So they put it there because that person will never have seen this child. Will be going off medical records that the doctor submitted. But I can tell you that I look at my kids' medical records. It doesn't have everything that we've talked about. I mean, my doctor, when my kids walk in, remembers that they want to be whatever it is that they wanted to be the last time they asked her that. This person doesn't know. And I get that that's not medical history, but this person, it's paperwork. It's paperwork that they're looking at as to whether accept or deny the medical exemption.
Right.
It then also gave the medical board and CDPH, the health department, full access to all medical records of those children. And it, at that point, didn't even specify, and it still actually doesn't specify, if it's every piece of medical record that's in that child's file or just to do with the medical exemption. We're talking about, and it's not a HIPAA violation, a privacy violation, because as a parent, you have to sign the piece of paper that says, yes, I'm willing to give over my medical record or my kid's medical records. Because if you don't do that, you're not getting a medical exemption approved. Your medical exemption would immediately be denied.
So it saves all this time wasted with subpoenas and just sidesteps the whole process.
Exactly. And in this, they felt that they could find these doctors that were script selling because those doctors wouldn't have seen the child. An argument is we have doctors who are specialists that won't have seen, they're not their own pediatrician that are giving medical exemptions. And furthermore, there are all these practices that won't even see on a child that doesn't have their full vaccine. So of course you're going to have different doctors as the specialist writing the medical exemption kind of thing. And even oncologists, you don't go to that. That's not your child's doctor that would be writing them. So there were big issues. We raised a lot of issues. I mean, we went through the bill and we had, I think, 40 questions as it went into the Assembly Health Committee. And as it went in there, some of those were changed. There were a huge amount of amendments that went into the Assembly Health Committee. It is let me finish that and then I'll come back to how the legislative process is different. Okay. The amendments that were made in the Health Committee were supposed to make the bill better. They absolutely made the bill, I don't even want to say worse. The bill is not functional. Like this bill that's going through cannot be implemented tomorrow. It has so many gaps. It has so many things that are not defined. It basically now says that the health department can no longer they can no longer accept. They don't accept or deny. They can just revoke. And in my mind, if you can revoke, then you're accepting the rest of them kind of thing, but by default. It now has a place that it's not every medical exemption that will be evaluated, but realistically, it most likely is. Because the trigger points for review of a medical exemption are either if a doctor writes more than 4 medical exemptions. So number 4, let's just put this in context. If a physician has 1,000 patients, we know that of 1,000 patients, according to the Harvard Lazarus study, that 2.6% the Harvard Lazarus study said 2.6% of people have vaccine reactions. Okay, so let's just say that that's our number. If 2.6% of people out of a practice of 1,000, that means they have 26 people that will have medical exemptions.
Right.
Okay, so to get over, and I get that not all of those are at kindergarten age, but to get over 5, even if you're not a specialist, to get over 5 is somewhat easy to do. You would hope that they would be doing that. And
that's even before you look at the fact that there's only a few doctors willing to write them. So they're going to have over, they're going to have thousands if they're doing any.
Exactly. So this number 5, and we were just like, why 5? Like, it's a completely arbitrary number. It doesn't have anything to do with the size of practice. I mean, our request is, can we make it the size of the practice? Or there's a opioid database here in California for script selling reasons. And in that, it's if your doctor is writing 10 times the average number of prescriptions. So that makes sense, right? So you're looking at the outlier that, why is this doctor writing 10 times the number of opioid prescriptions? And there may be a reason. They may be an oncologist, or they may be a pain specialist or something like that. But so so we asked for, can we have either one of those? Something that's not just the number 5, because the number 5 is very different if you have a practice of 100 people versus 7,000 people.
Well, and besides, most of the people writing them are not just writing them for their own practice.
Right.
So it's really not a question of how many are in a practice. It's a question of percentage of the state that you have to cover.
Right? Exactly. So that's one way it gets triggered. The other way it gets triggered is if your school is below 95% vaccination rate. So this also has an issue because the way that number is calculated is not based on individual vaccines. So you can have a school that has an average vaccination rate of 60%, which seems really low. But then for every individual vaccine, they have a 95% level of vaccination rate. And people are like, well, how does that work? The thing is, so for each individual vaccine, you're looking at the total number, the total percentage that have that vaccination. Mm-hmm. If there's one, but on an average rate, you're looking across the person. If one person is missing one dose of one of those vaccines, they're considered not vaccinated.
Right, right.
So when you average that, if you have 10 people that are not vaccinated for one dose of something, they're all no's in your average column, but in each individual column, they're only a no in that one disease.
Yeah.
So this is, there are a lot of schools that are going to get triggered at the 95% because they are up on their contagious diseases, on measles, mumps, rubella, whooping cough, and chickenpox. They're up higher than 95%, but their average is much lower. The other thing is that there are a lot of schools that have a vaccination rate under 95%, and it is not because of medical exemptions. You have to realize there are only 0.9% in medical exemptions. Less than 1% medical exemption is in our state. There are a lot of kids that are on conditional entrance or overdue, which means that basically they started off the school year they were planning on getting vaccinated, but it's most likely healthcare access that is stopping them from getting fully vaccinated, and that's not taken into consideration. So there are a lot of issues with this bill that are just, there are things that are common sense, that are literally common sense.
But it depends again on motive, because if their motive for it was common sense, then obviously they just weren't doing it very well. If their motive was something else, they were doing it perfectly.
Yes.
Because putting in the number 5 gets rid of almost all the exemption writers.
Yeah.
So
and that's the thing, and that's what our doctors have said. They've said, but the other piece that is absolutely not clear is what happens when you hit number 5, right? So it gets reviewed. Well, what does that mean? It gets reviewed for what? Like how? And I don't even know, I as a doctor can legitimately be saying, let's take the example of the child who has a sibling with seizures from a vaccine. Yeah. I'm writing the sibling a medical exemption. That is my standard of care. That is the way I practice medicine.
Right.
Okay. But the person I'm giving it to may not agree with that. Well, I don't even know what that person's standard is. So I can't, I'm writing this 5th medical exemption and I don't know what I'm being graded on.
When you say the person you're giving it to, who are you talking about?
So there will be one person, and I'm guessing it's Charity Dean. It hasn't been said, but there will be one person at CDPH at the health department.
The official in the health department.
Yeah.
Right.
That we'd be looking at, but you don't know. I mean, it's like going into a class, right? My daughter's in high school. It's like going into a high school class and being told, these are your expectations. You're gonna put in we're not giving you any expectations. We're not telling you what the standard is. You have to just submit work, and we'll grade it. And we won't tell you what we're grading it on or what the right information is. You need to go find the information and you need to submit whatever you think is reasonable, is the right answer.
That's a good system if your goal is to reject the exemption.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, yes. But what it does is, and you're right, it stops our doctors from writing them, because that one doctor that we were going around the Capitol with to meet with legislators equated it to an audit and said, I do my taxes every year. I have an accountant do them. Do I think they're 100% correct? I do think they're 100% correct. But if I had to hand in a 5th piece of paper and that guaranteed that I would going to be audited by the IRS, and I had a choice not to hand that 5th piece of paper in, would I hand it in? No, I wouldn't hand it in, because even though I think I've done everything right, I don't know, so I wouldn't hand it in. And that's where we're at with these. The doctor who files that 5th exemption first is the bravest doctor in California, because they are putting their career on the line.
Right. So since most of the remaining ones doing exemptions are doing way more than 5, it's basically designed to get rid of them all.
Yep. And I don't think we will have, if this bill passes, and it looks like it will, the question is what form does it pass in? I don't think we will have doctors writing medical exemptions anymore.
Who is writing the exact conditions of these bills? I think there's a lot of misconception in the public.
Senator Penn.
They think that the individual legislator writes his or her own bill. That's almost never the case.
Okay. So in that sense, yes. So it is usually the sponsoring organization. So in this sense, it's CMA. It's CMA, the California Medical Association. The American Academy of Pediatrics is also a sponsor in California. I think they have a lot less to do with it. The CMA has 30 lobbyists in the Capitol at all times.
Okay, so as far as who knows to write the exact words of art and the conditions in the bill and all that stuff? It's specialized attorneys for that organization,
Yes.
right? And they are following the direction of somebody else because they're just individuals. They can't just decide how to do it. There's someone who's engineering the language of all these bills. And it's not Senator Pan and it's not CMA, general run-of-the-mill members. I think it's really interesting, even though it's never done, just to look as precisely as possible at when you write one sentence in a bill, and it's all legal language, words of art that have different meanings from common English. Who is deciding how to orchestrate those bills? And I think that would be really interesting to know.
Yeah, and I don't think we will. I don't think we'll ever really know because we're not on that. We're not unless we get a poll in that side.
Yeah, but it is coming from a really well organized, concentrated PowerPoint somewhere. And filtering down through all these levels of different motivation. Yep. And as far as motivation, like what you said about the insurance companies giving incentives to doctors to get everybody vaccinated, normally insurance companies, as most people understand, only care about margin of profit for their stockholders. Yep. And so they would only offer to give away money to doctors if it was going to cut their losses. So they're basically doing it as if vaccines make everybody healthier, so there will be less claims.
I think there's also pharmaceutical money coming into the health insurance industry.
Yeah, I think it's changing it completely.
Promoting that, yeah. Right. I mean, you look at what drugs are accepted and not accepted by certain health insurance companies. That's determined by the lobby world that you're involved in now probably has its counterparts all through all those levels. Oh, absolutely, yes, yeah. Okay. And I would say that there are the lobbyists that we have. So when SB 276, the bill this year was implemented, we actually hired 2 more lobbyists. So we have 3 lobbyists working on this. Wow. And it was my decision. I had looked after 277. What could we have done differently? Right. And I think do I feel like, as we're coming to the end of this process, do I feel like hiring the lobbyists? They're extremely expensive, and it's where all of our funder money has gone. We don't usually fundraise unless we have something going on. Do I think it was worth it? Do I think it got us anywhere? I don't know that it got us anywhere from the perspective of changing the bill. It definitely got us conversations with legislatures. It definitely, I feel like we had doors that were much more open this go around than they were in 277. I mean, literally in 277, our lobbyist said to us, she's like, I've never experienced this. Like, I never get told, you absolutely can't meet with the person, with the health staffer. Like, she's just like, I don't get a meeting with the legislature all the time, but, I at least get the health staffer or the person I'm supposed to be speaking with. Like, we're getting the bottom of the barrel stuff here. Like, this is just ridiculous. So this year, I would say it definitely got us many more open doors. We were also there right from the beginning. We still had to, we have and I love our grassroots movement and how vocal and how passionate and how, emotional they are. I love that. But we really are Senator Pan milks anything that we do and paints us as the crazy people.
Exactly.
We had things that happened, which, again, I don't deter anyone from doing what they feel passionate about. But we had things like there was a group that sent bricks, literally bricks, with writing on them saying, weigh your decision. And their picture of the bricks, and this had been done to Nancy Pelosi regarding the wall Trump was building. Yeah. And so they were trying to mirror that. But it came across as, and I said when they started doing it, I was like, this is not going to look good. Because to me, if you think a brick, what do I think of a brick? I think of a brick coming through a window. Yeah.
Gary Larson's cartoons are full of that.
Exactly. And so to me, and that's, legislators, they found it amusing, but at the same time, they're like, we don't understand the brick. We don't get the brick. What is the brick? And one office was just like, yeah, we're glad we don't have any windows, that it wasn't delivered that way. And I'm just like, oh, okay, yes. So it's, we had to spend a lot of time sort of differentiating ourselves and saying, those people, and explaining it and saying, those people, they're just passionate. This is what they meant by it. But it is just hard. And it's we are painted. Pan does a fabulous job, and the media that he has on his tail do a fabulous job of, portraying the crazy anti-vaxxers and anti-vaxxer this. Just a broad stroke, and none of us are, Pan went on the Senate floor after the other thing that happened was this guy, Austin Bennett, 2 weeks ago, shoved Senator Pan.
I saw that
on live feed, and it's like, and none of our movement associates with him.
That was very effective to make anti-vaxxers look crazy and violent.
Absolutely, and Pan,
that's why they left it up all over social media too.
Oh yeah, and Pan the next day went on the Senate floor, and Josh Coleman, who is one of our, his son is in a wheelchair from vaccine injury. He has been organizing these protests, and he did one at Comic-Con, and they were wearing the V for Vendetta mask, the sort of anonymous mask.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic visuals. And he's a photographer and a videographer. So the visuals of what he has are fabulous. And that was appropriate. The V for Vendetta mask was appropriate for Comic-Con because that's, it's part of that. Right. He had done one at Disneyland, which was the opening of the Star Wars exhibit, and he had everybody dressed up in Star Wars. And so his thing is very much doing what's appropriate. So he had a rally planned at the Capitol. 600, it was amazing. It happened last week. Amazing rally. 600 people with the signs, and the doctors were in white coats, the nurses were in blue scrubs, and the regular people were in red and white t-shirts. So it was red, white, and blue. Yeah. That's the theme. And the whole point was, these signs and just informing people, giving people information, mass education. And Senator Van comes up on the Senate floor and he says, I don't really know anything about the rally next week, but they're going to be wearing masks, and these Guy Fawkes masks. And, do you know who Guy Fawkes was? Guy Fawkes tried to blow up Parliament. And here we are sitting in our state's Parliament. And what do you think he's going to do? They're a terrorist. We should consider this terrorist. He used the word terrorism. And I was sitting there going, oh, my God, you are milking this beyond belief. Josh had been on live feeds. He knew exactly that they weren't going to wear the V for Vendetta masks. But even so, it was just like, you are just blowing this out of proportion. After that, there were people that were, CMA consultants on Twitter, Mike Madrid, on Twitter saying that we were white extremists, that we were terrorists, that we were, and it was just like, come on.
Even the black people are being called white supremacists now. It's really interesting.
So anyway, we are where we are, and this is sort of a long story short, but we are where we are, and SB 276 went through the legislature, it went through the Senate side. They only gave us, and this is where I will say, I have so many issues with our California legislature. They only gave us one hearing in the Health Committee in the Senate side, because Senator Pan put the bill in so late. Their excuse or their argument was, we don't have time for more committees. Okay. It'll get more committees in the other house. So it went to the Health Committee in the Senate. Senator Pan is the chair of the Health Committee, which means that basically you don't go up against the chair on his own bill. You don't vote against him, because if you want any of your bills to go through, he's not going to let them through, because as the chair, he gets a choice to let them through or not. Right. So that sailed through the Health Committee. That wasn't a surprise because he was the chair. Yeah. It then went to appropriations, which financially, fiscally, again, on the Senate side, it's, we know it's going to get amendments in the Assembly side. So we're just going to send it over to the Assembly. It got voted on the Senate floor. He only got 24 votes. He needed 21 votes. He only got 24 votes. So we felt that, but again, we thought we could kill it. Let me rephrase that. We didn't think we could kill it, but there were definitely 4 senators that were questioning it enough that they should have voted no if they were voting on policy and not politics. Right. And they chose at the last minute. They basically, two or three of them basically were just like, we're going to vote yes on the bill because it's going to get through anyway. So we're just going to vote yes on the bill. And that saves our face too, because he's our colleague. We're just, that way we're not like against him, because we need our bills also to be supported. Went over to the assembly, and we did a lot of work on the assembly, both our organization and the grassroots. Our organization met with our goal over, they had a summer break so it went to the assembly, they had a summer break, and our goal over the summer break and the weeks before and the week after was to meet with all 80 legislative offices on the assembly side. Okay. And we did that. Okay. And a lot of people got active over the summer. A lot of legislators, they go back to their district in the summer and they do coffee events and other events, community events where you can meet with them. And so a lot of our grassroots people met with them and shared their concerns with the bill. Before that, it had gone through the amendments, so it was a bill that we felt has a lot of issues with it. We came back. It went it was sitting in Assembly Appropriations. Lorena Gonzalez, who is basically Pan's equivalent in the Assembly, is the chair of Appropriations. We thought that it would at least be amended a little bit, so something coming out of Appropriations would be changed. Usually most bills are. What was interesting this year was there were very, very few amendments coming out of the Assembly Appropriations. They basically let it go. Senator Pan, because there were no amendments, could bring it to the floor. The earliest he could have brought it to the floor was Tuesday, which he did. And he did, the earliest he could bring it to the floor was Wednesday, but he asked for a special waive of rules. And at the very end of the assembly floor session on Tuesday, they argued it and voted it. He got, again, we're so close, but we're not close enough. He needed 41 votes. He got 47 votes. He got 11 no votes, I think it was, and 17 abstentions, and abstentions count as no votes. Right. So we had, and half of the people that voted no or abstained were Democrats. So it was all the Republicans voted no, but we have we have a super minority of Republicans. They don't, we love them, but they don't count for anything. Yeah. I heard on television they're scheduled to be eliminated. Yeah. So they, so we felt like, we did well because he only got 47 votes out of 80. But, it wasn't enough to stop it. He brought it then. So the weird turn of events. We've been requesting a meeting with Senator Pan since this bill went into, actually even before this went into effect. But that would be a really interesting meeting. Yes, and I'll tell you more. So we've been asking for the meeting. Our three lobbyists, our lobbyists lobby other bills, and they've gotten meetings with him on those bills, but not with this bill. And, I think Senator Pan has a completely closed door. He will not meet with anybody from the opposition, period, end of story. And I was talking to an LA Times reporter, and I said to her, she said, why are your people so emotional and so loud about this issue? And I said, when you have somebody who's really arrogant, who says that they don't need any amendments, this bill is passing through, I am, going to get it done. When you have somebody that much arrogance, who has a closed door, the voices that are not being heard are only going to get louder, and the knocks on his door are only going to get harder. Right. So Tuesday morning, I was on my way up to Sacramento, and I was just like, all right, you know what? One last ditch effort. And I didn't think the bill was going to get heard in the assembly that afternoon, because it shouldn't have been heard before Wednesday. And we assumed there were amendments that were going to happen, further amendments, because the governor so the governor came out in June and said, I'm not happy with the bill. And that was sort of started the scramble to do the first round of amendments. And he came out in July and again said, I'm inclined to sign the bill, but it still needs work. And so when the governor says it needs work, you go to the governor and say, what work does it need for you to sign it? Yeah, because you kind of need the signature, right? Pan didn't do that. So the governor, and we have been trying to meet with the governor as well. But so anyway, Tuesday I'm coming up, and I came up for a different meeting on a different bill that we're working on. I came up and one of our lobbyists calls and he's just like, well, so Pan's person, his communications director, called me and gave us the opportunity to meet with him at 9:45 tomorrow morning. And I was just like, wow, okay, yes, let's do it. All right. Yeah. And we had to leave our cell phones at the door.
Wow.
It was quite a meeting. So I'll get there. But so I'm in Sacramento and suddenly my phone blows up and they're hearing SB 276 on the floor right now, on the assembly floor. And I was like, how can that happen? They can't do that. Right. They'd waived the rules. He was doing it. And so then I called my lobbyist because I was with one of our other ones. And I was just like, okay, hang on. This meeting, he offered it to us tomorrow morning, knowing he's bringing the bill up today.
Yeah.
That's bullshit. Sorry, excuse my language, but that's complete BS.
Yeah.
So then.
But it makes sense.
It makes complete sense, sure. And I had said to our lobbyist, is he just doing this to check the box to say, yes, I met with the opposition? Because one of the things that we got asked in every meeting with every legislator was, well, have you spoken to Senator Pan about your concerns? And the answer was, no, he won't meet with us. So this checks his box of, I met with them. I can say, well, I met with them.
Exactly.
So we decided, so it was going through the assembly floor, and I said to our lobbyist, we're not going tomorrow. We're not going because it's like, this is ridiculous. This is just absolutely ridiculous. 6 minutes after the floor vote, the governor's office puts out 2 tweets that basically say, you took the floor vote. I have issues with the bill. There are still issues that need to be amended before it gets to my desk. And we were just like, oh my God, okay. So the governor is basically saying, like, you just screwed yourself by taking that vote. So Senator Pan then had 3 options. He could either move forward with the bill, he could expunge the vote in the assembly, so basically remove the vote, say that vote wasn't
that was a practice vote. We didn't really mean
right, it. Exactly. We're going to make amendments which have to be in on by Friday, and then we're going to move forward. Or what's also done sometimes is this bill moves forward, and what's called a trailer bill is created. That is basically another bill that is at the same point, so it hasn't been voted on by the assembly.
It's like an amendment after the fact, kind of.
Right. Completely guts it and puts in the amendments, and then that moves through. And both of them get to the governor's desk, and either the governor vetoes one, signs the other, or signs both of them, which means the second one they go in conjunction with one another. The second one amends the first one. So we decided, okay, well, given that the governor has said this, we'll actually go ahead and have the meeting with Senator Pan, because if we have the meeting with Senator Pan, then, maybe he's looking at amendments. Maybe he'll listen to us. Maybe he'll have a policy discussion with us. So I go back up to Sacramento on Wednesday morning. We go in the meeting with Senator Pan. As I said, we had to put our phones, leave them at the desk because they didn't.
Did you wear tinfoil hats or anything to identify yourself?
One of our lobbyists said that. He was just like, so should we wear tinfoil hats too? And I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, maybe carrying pitchforks would be good or something.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're in the meeting, 9:45 meeting. He knows that it's going, the Senate session starts at 10 o'clock. So we had assumed, okay, maybe he'll give us, he's giving us 15 minutes, but he'll, most legislators, you don't have to be on the floor right at the beginning. He could have given us 15 more minutes kind of thing. So we were going with, maybe he'll give us half an hour kind of thing if we get into policy discussion. And, we had all hopes for this meeting.
My guess is he gives you 6 minutes or something like that, and it's all saying hi and goodbye or something like that.
So he gave us 15 minutes, and the first 12 minutes, first 10 minutes were him telling us how bad our movement was and how threatening they are.
Yeah.
And that we need to condone it. And that the law, and I basically was just like, can we get on, we were told this meeting was about 276. Can we get onto the policy? Yeah. And he gave us there were 3 minutes of policy discussion. And it was clear that he was not interested in amendments. He then got a phone call and he was like, I need to leave because I need to get to the session floor.
Right.
He runs to the session, he leaves. We leave, we go outside to debrief, and my phone blows up again saying, he's got it on the Senate floor. Like, he is moving this thing forward.
Right.
And I was just like, he knew all along during that meeting. I was just like, okay, this meeting is exactly what I had anticipated, but really not hoped for. You know, we really hoped that we would have a serious policy discussion. Yeah. And it just didn't happen. And so it really was a checkbox meeting for him. So I will say, we are the only organization that he has met with. So I'll take that credibility.
Right. You get a gold star for that.
Exactly. I'll take that for one.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it passed the Senate. It passed the Senate with more votes than the last time, because there were a few. They basically hedged it on the governor is going to ask you to do amendments. Yeah. I don't know whether Senator Pan will do amendments. I mean, I think we have in a way, I hope he doesn't, because I think the governor will actually veto the bill. If it maybe
Pan thinks he can get an override vote. You know,
he can't get an override. So I think there are two pieces with an override vote. So he has the votes in the Senate to do an override vote. He certainly doesn't in the Assembly. I think it would be very hard for him to get them in the Assembly. The other thing is, it's somewhat political suicide to do an override vote as a politician. This is Gavin Newsom's first term. If it was last year and it was Jerry Brown's last term, I think they probably would have done it. I think Gavin Newsom's first term, you don't want to piss Gavin Newsom off. And you're basically telling him, we don't agree with what you just did. Right. It would be political suicide for many of those legislatures. And I just don't think
so. There's some other strategy going on.
Well, so I think, you know, again, Senator Pan's arrogance is extremely high. I mean, there was a tweet put out by Vaccinate California, which is the supposed parent group that is behind this bill as well. And they tweeted out and they said, you know, we've put a meeting request into the governor. We didn't realize there was still he still had issues with the bill. And I'm like, have you been living under a rock? Like, he said in July, he still had issues with the bill. Like, you must be so arrogant to think that, and you know, if it were my bill, I would go to and you've had issues before, I would go to the governor and just say, can you just, you know, give me a stamp of approval on this, that you'll sign this the way it is. Like, that's just common sense. But again, you're right, they don't, you know, they're not going with common sense, but it's so I believe what will happen is that there will be a second bill that will be put in on by Friday that will move through both houses, and Governor Newsom will get both of those bills on his desk.
Okay.
And we do not believe that his amendments will make this bill as good as it needs to be, let's put it that way. And our goal as an organization is next year. And this is the one place that I think as I said, you know, we're coming to the end of the session and we hired 3 lobbyists. It's been incredibly expensive. Do I think it was worth it? I absolutely think it was worth it, because what it did was it put us in every single office in the Capitol. And it means that we now know which legislators had what issues with the bill. And we will go back to them next year and say, look, we need a cleanup bill on this bill. Like, we need to proactively make this bill workable. And we need you know, you said you had an issue with this piece of it. Will you support making a change to this piece of legislation in this way, and really cleaning it up to a point where it is workable for our doctors.
It kind of sounds like with the responses that you were getting from each one, that maybe they actually read the bill. Is that possible?
I don't know that they have read the bill, but they have been given summaries of the bill. So I find it hard to know whether anybody has fully read that bill. I mean, even people that say they have read and understood it, I think, and realized all the issues of it. You know, I would say it probably takes a good hour and a half to go through that bill and read it line by line and think about what are the ramifications. Because it's not just reading, it's what are the ramifications if this goes into effect. What is the ripple effect on this?
You know, it sounds like that's one of the big things missing in our form of government, is that people are allowed to vote on things they never read. And they're voting for reasons, yes or no, for reasons that have nothing to do with the merits of the bill.
Yes.
And what if there was some mechanism that they couldn't vote yes on any bill unless they went through the process that you just mentioned.
Yeah. What I will put it all back to is money. If we could get the money out of politics, and it includes firing all the lobbyists.
Yeah.
I love our lobbyists, but if we could get the money out of politics and it really was based on the language and the merits of a bill rather than the politics of a bill, it would be different. I think the other thing in California is to reduce the number of bills. I would love each legislature to have 10 bills. And because the other thing that means is then you're having a lot more people working together on bills, because they want 30, 40 bills. They've got bill ideas for that much. But can you talk to somebody else and say, oh, we would like to do a bill with you on this issue. And we'll do another bill with you on this other issue, so that we've got we're basically using both our bills to do that.
Yeah.
The fact that they have 3,500 bills coming in over their desks, how can they read all of those bills? Realistically, how can they? So what are they getting? They're getting synopsis formats from the lobbyists.
So they're totally dependent on who writes the synopsis.
Yep.
And nobody even has ever heard of who that is.
Well, I think the synopsis initially is written by the sponsor of the bill. So again, it's very biased.
That's interesting, right?
I think it is also, it's only when somebody brings up a nuance of the bill or an issue of the bill that they then go, oh, okay, that's maybe an issue or a side that I need to think about or concentrate on or focus on. It's and the louder the movement and the lobbyists, I will say that, I think there are definitely some. I was really proud of the assembly members. I have to say that. I was really proud that they stood up and voted mostly, I don't think fully, but voted mostly based on the information that they had been given, and that we got that many Democrats to abstain. We had 15 Democrats that abstained. No, 15. Was it 15? 11 or 15. But it was 15. Democrats that abstained. That's a significant number that actually voted based on what they knew about this bill rather than based on the politics. The politics would have them vote yes for this bill.
Right,
and so,
exactly.
So I'm really proud of that group and thankful for them for being true. But it is not common for that to happen. It is very much, who you're swayed by and who's got your ear at the time. And we even had, there were 2 senators that we had gone in and met with them. We thought they were on our side. They were, they asked all the right questions. They knew the information. And then they had a doctor from the CMA come in and tell them that, so one of the other things with this bill is it restricts the medical exemption criteria to the CDC precautions and contraindications, which are basically so severe, not regular, like seizures aren't even included in that. Really? So a CMA doctor basically came in and said, oh, no, the seizures would be included because look, it says if you have an allergy to the vaccine. And I'm like, I don't think most doctors would look at allergy to a vaccine and translate that into seizures. Like, I get the dot-to-dot process that you can get there, but I don't think that they would read the contraindications and say, oh, yeah, this kid has allergies to the vaccine equaling seizure. Right. And so this staffer basically said to me, you know what, we're going to have to agree to disagree. Like, we understood your point that seizures weren't included, but the CMA has told us seizures are included, and so we're going to vote for this bill now. And I was just like...
If it's not written down, it's not included.
Right. And I was just like, and she was just like, we can continue to have this discussion, but we're not going to agree on it. And I was just like, wow, that's, it's whose ear do they have and who do they believe? And I'm not a doctor. I've just done 50,000 hours of research on vaccines, but I'm not a doctor. I don't have the letters after my name. Right. So.
Since we're down, down to the last few minutes, I want to make sure and cover a few points at least briefly. They include where it is now, what's about to happen, what's the time frame on the remainder of the process for this bill, what is likely to be the next one, since 277 was the first one. Yep. This is like episode 2.
Yep.
if it was like Star Wars or something. What's episode 3? Where
I think
both sides.
episode 3, and I don't know that Senator Pan will bring one forward next.
And is it rights of the child or something like that?
Well, he's tried that. He tried that 2 years ago, and that we completely shut down very, very quickly. So that one he tried, and I don't think will come back. Actually, he tried a similar one this year. It also died. He had a children's cabinet, which was basically the same thing as children's rights. And you have to understand, for anybody listening, children's rights equals parents not having rights and the state having
Yes, children's rights sounds really compassionate and wonderful.
It does. It sounds wonderful. And we're all for children having rights, but that's not what it is. It's taking away parental rights and putting the government in its place. So
which has already happened to a great degree. Yeah.
Yes. I think the next one, and I will say Senator Pan has 3 more years in office.
Okay.
I would say he is, I think homeschoolers are on the list. They are the ones that are the last ones. I think, so currently in California, our children on IEPs, which are the special needs kids, they don't have to be vaccinated because under federal law, they can have their services. So federal law trumps state law.
Okay.
But they are a growing number. I think those two. I also wouldn't be surprised if Senator Pan goes after adult vaccinations next. I really think he would love to have your vaccination status linked to like your driver's license. I don't think that will go anywhere.
Very efficient.
I think there are too many adults when you say to them, "Oh, you need to get vaccinated now," that are like, "No friggin' way."
Well, they have to be at a certain point of believing that if they don't get vaccines, they're going to die.
Yes.
And at that point, they might go with it.
Well, but I think enough adults live day to day realizing that they are not fully vaccinated. I mean, when you look at the adult vaccine schedule, I would have to get probably 10 vaccines to be up to date. Even though I was, as a child in England, fully vaccinated, which was 7 vaccines.
Yeah.
But, I think people would be like, and the other thing is what you risk is you over-vaccinate the adult population. They have voices to speak about reactions.
If the reactions aren't severe enough, that's true.
Well, the babies that have reactions, it's their parents seeing it. The babies can't speak about their brains swelling up and they're feeling awful or they're getting autoimmune disorders or whatever. Yeah. When you have enough adults speaking about that, it's going to be an issue. Where do we go next? As I said, I think we will likely try and bring legislation forward. What can the general people do? And I think this applies to every state in the country because this is an issue in every state in the country. Yeah. My one recommendation is know your legislators. You have 2 of them on a state level and you have 2 of them on a federal level. And the federal ones are harder, but your state legislatures personally. Go into their offices, go to their district offices, bring them organic muffins,
You're saying they may actually talk to you?
Oh, they will. Oh, they absolutely will. And my piece is, don't go in there the first time going, I'm anti-vaccines. You need to know all this information and spew all this information. Go in there and say, I'd like to find out what Senator so-and-so or Assembly Member so-and-so is doing. What are they interested in? I'd really like to help out, with his causes or look them up, find out if they have kids, find out what their passion is. Is their passion education? Is their passion health? Is their passion the environment? They all have something that it falls into our issue. And go talk to them about, I saw that they have this education bill. I really am interested in that. Talk to them, get to know them really well. As I say to my people, my goal is to have both my legislature's cell phone numbers. Not that I will ever use it, but that I'm on that relationship level.
It shows an attitude,
that you are that close. My senator, I go to his coffee mornings, and he's just like, "Hi, Christina," and I stand in the back, and if I have a question, he's like, "Christina, yes, Christina is one of our most active activists. She's amazing. We have differences of opinion, but she's,
That's great.
Having that relationship, because when a bill like this comes up, you can get in the door. Right. And that's the part of the reason why we've been so successful is because we've had people that over the years have had those relationships and have gone in. And the stronger those relationships, the better you are. So I would say
find the time to do it.
find the time to do it. And even if you don't have a bill that's active or anything going on, because it could always come. And it may not even be on this issue. You know, I mean, there are 5G issues, there are pesticide issues, there's a whole load of things that people who are on our issue are also involved in. So, you know, there's other things that you can get involved with.
Well, speaking of other issues, are there things besides the vaccine issues that your group is going to be working on? And if so, what?
So we have an ongoing, the glyphosate, I would say our two bigger issues are the glyphosate issue and Roundup. And you know, with the lawsuits that have come out on that, we have an assembly member that has tried to get bills passed to stop having pesticides in school. We have a project that we were going to have it this year, but it sort of fell through the cracks with everything else that's been going on, that basically is doing it on a grassroots level of getting glyphosate and Roundup out of schools and out of cities and out of parks, and really trying to push schools to take that on themselves. I think those are our two big issues. You know, the vaccine issue, I will say it predominates when we have a bill like this, because it's what, you know, there are other issues that we have been, you know, supporting this year, but it's really what legislation comes up and we get involved in. Okay,
sounds good. And if people want to follow it along to see how things are going and what you're doing, I notice you have 2 different websites and 2 organizations that are connected, right?
We do, yes. So we have a Voice for Choice, which is a voiceforchoice.org, and that is our 501c3. So that's our education arm. And then we have a 501c4, which is a Voice for Choice advocacy, which today's I'm wearing that hat because and that allows us to lobby and do political do things politically. And so I'm the president of both of them. We have different boards, and I sit and wear I purposefully put on different hats when I'm talking about different things. So
and how do you get enough money to operate?
Fundraising. So and as I said, you know, we fundraise when we need it. So we are not we don't get a huge amount of money during the off years, so to speak. We have some amazing funders. We have a couple of funders who are larger donors, and then most of our funding otherwise is from grassroots, and just, you know, and donations. We're completely donation. I put in a lot of my money as well. I put a lot of
I can imagine that. My suspicion was you were funding a lot of it yourself.
Yeah, I am, and I'm, you know, I sort of, whatever we get, I'll make up the difference. I thankfully have 2 businesses that I have amazing people that work in them, and you know, I'm able to have money come in and allow myself to spend a lot.
You want to just for a second say anything about those other businesses or what they are, or how people?
Sure. So I have a market research company. That's my career. I do market research for a lot of Silicon Valley companies, and then my other business is is also more of a passion. It doesn't make as much money. It's a food delivery service here in the Bay Area that follows the Weston A. Price diet or model. So raw milk, and that's actually how I got into this whole political piece.
That's still a big issue, by the way.
It is, yes.
An interesting thing to talk about.
Yeah. So
do those 2 businesses have websites?
They do. So my market research is CEI-research.com, and then our food delivery is realfoodbayarea.com.
Okay, sounds great. So you've helped people find sources of the raw milk and other good food and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's basically nutrient-dense food that we act. It's kind of like a CSA, but we have many farms that we deliver from.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe if you have time, we'll kind of stay in touch and keep people up to date on how things develop.
Absolutely, and you know, I think anybody who's in California, you know, we have a fight ahead of us in the next few years. I think anybody out of California, you know, just be aware of what's going on. Get in touch with your local people.
The same thing is coming to all the states for sure.
Yeah, and New York is even in a worse state than we are.
Yeah, so. New York, Illinois, and other places like that. Okay, sounds good. Well, thanks for giving us the time, and hopefully we'll be in touch soon.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so that was Christina Hildebrand, founder of A Voice for Choice, and also A Voice for Choice Advocacy, and those are both websites as well with .org after each one of them. They both deserve to be looked at and supported, I think. The attitude and energy and just work that she's putting into the educational campaigns that she does now and trying to get sanity and common sense into the actions of the so-called representatives in the state capitol in California is great and deserves everybody's support in whatever way they can give it. If you've got money, it sounds like a good thing to donate to, from what I can tell, and just to stay in touch with and bookmark those sites. It was a good kind of wrap up of current developments on SB 276, the bill to basically get rid of medical exemptions in California, which is on the way to happening, I guess, from what she says. And what will come after it is not so clear. That's why I was trying to ask her about that, and whether it would be suggested that the next episode might be to get rid of either exemptions in homeschooling or homeschooling altogether, which we've discussed that issue with Alex Newman, and I hope we'll be back on soon. The future outlook is uncertain, but certainly if nobody gives any input or has any positive educational effect on the people around them, it's going to be a more difficult future for sure. And again, back to the work that we've been focusing a lot on in planetaryhealingclub.com, and it's like the main way to positively impact other people and open up their understanding to a higher level is not to try to force them to change their mind, because you wouldn't want that done to you either. It's like, live whatever you believe is right and the best and most harmonious thing. All of us try to be an example of that. That's where the important work really lies, because if you do that, change your consciousness and stop thinking in terms of enemies and adversaries, and replace it with the idea of caring about everybody, regardless whether they're for or against you, and that everybody needs assistance and support, and the more that happens, then understandings gradually start to open up, more than if there's just arguments and fights and debates, which are usually geared toward showing that the other person is wrong. And that's really not, the best goal to have for all this stuff. If we want a positive change, you've got to be an example of that, and that shows the value of what you're wanting to promote is what do you like, what are you doing? And it doesn't mean that any of us are successfully being a totally good example. That's going to take a while, but at least an effort in that direction. And that's why we started Planetary Healing Club too. And at this point in watching it, I was thinking, well, there's probably, X thousand number of people that would want to be part of that effort worldwide. And there probably are, but I don't know how to reach the ones in faraway places that never listen to our radio shows or anything like that. So I've gotten to the place of not worrying. It's not for everybody. It's just those people that specifically are at the place of wanting to work on themselves, their health, their consciousness, how the energy that they put into their lives and into whatever projects they're working on, or their family. And it comes down to working on yourself and taking full responsibility. Kind of like Dr. Hugh Len, who started Ho'oponopono, which is a really interesting thing in itself, that you take full responsibility, forget about making everybody else change. It's like the old saying, physician, heal thyself. We're all the physician in that case. Heal yourself. Let the barriers to complete understanding drop off. And then even if you don't say a word, you're going to impact people a lot. And if you do say a word, it's going to carry a completely different energy. So if you're out there promoting a cause or working for or against something, or, going to your state capital or Washington or whatever, because of who you are, it's going to have a completely different residual effect. And the bottom line is always, self-assessment. What can you do to improve yourself? And that's going to change the effect of every word you have on other people. And obviously Christina's doing a lot of that, and is making a great contribution that's an example to everybody, whether or not you do it in political arenas or anywhere else. Who you are is what you're really promoting. So I'm grateful that she would give us some time. She's really busy, and everybody should watch what happens in California, because it says a lot about the possible future of every other state in the country and every other part of the world. The things that she talked about today are global issues, and the issue of whether life on this planet is going to go toward human-friendly, freedom-oriented, harmony, health, real health, which is almost illegal to talk about now, and things that are good for people, or whether it's going to sink into a new dark age, which the rulers are really pushing for, thinking that it's going to benefit them economically and power-wise, and they don't even realize the people they're working for at levels high above them. At those levels, it's not about money at all. Money is just being used to motivate the intermediate corporate and government agency levels, and they're really into the money, and they're willing to sell themselves and do anything for more money and power and prestige. But their bosses that are directing from behind the scenes where they're enthusiastically going are not in it for money. They already control the money system. That's not their goal. So, become more aware, work on yourself. It's your best contribution to the whole world. Get your health back, learn real health information, even as it's being taken away. Find out about it, other things become much clearer. And when you do that, the internal work also becomes something more real and accessible. Whereas if your body's kind of bothering you all the time and you're in pain and you fall for this thing that if you're at a certain age, you have to have this kind of health problem, and if you have, you blame it on bad genetics or, running bad luck, running into some evil germ or something like that, it takes all the responsibility away from you when you start understanding that you look at lifestyle habits and thought patterns, physical and non-physical together, and then pair that up with what you observe in your life. Then you start learning, and that puts the power in your hands to change everything. If you change yourself, it changes everybody else. It sounds like just a, non-practical, philosophical, imaginary thing. It's not. So find out. We'll try to do more videos during the week, too, to add to the whole story. And if you're one of those few people that would like to start seriously evaluating and working on yourself, you could take a look at planetaryhealingclub.com if you want to, and I and the others will be there live every week on Saturdays. And if you're in some part of the world that's not practical, you have access to all the archives if you're a member, and the small membership dues go to support our nonprofit and keep all of our operations going. So it's well used. Anyway, thanks for the time. I really appreciate it. I hope the rest of your week goes great, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.